On September 26, 1954, the ferry Toya Maru left the port of Hokkaido, bound across the Tsugaru Strait for Aomori. A typhoon was churning the waters, but the captain believed the worst had passed. He was wrong. Winds tore into the ship, seawater flooded her engine room, and the Toya Maru capsized within sight of land, dragging more than 1,000 passengers and crew down with her. Four other ferries sank that same night. It remains one of the deadliest maritime disasters in Japanese history. Japan's engineers had talked for decades about a tunnel beneath the strait, the narrow, violent stretch of water separating the main island of Honshu from the northern island of Hokkaido. After the Toya Maru, talk turned into resolve. If ships could not be trusted to cross safely, then Japan would go under the sea instead of over it. It would take 34 years, cost the lives of 34 workers, and become the longest and deepest undersea tunnel on Earth. They called it the Seikan Tunnel, a name built from the first characters of Aomori's port, Aomori and Hokkaido, Sei and Kan. Before anyone could dig, they had to know what they were digging through. Starting in 1964, survey ships crisscrossed the strait, firing sound waves into the seabed and reading the echoes like a doctor reading an X-ray. What they found was not reassuring. The strait sat atop a fractured volcanic landscape, a patchwork of hardened lava, brittle rock, and soft, waterlogged sediment, laced with fault lines where the earth itself had once cracked open. Two undersea mountain ranges rose beneath the strait, and the planned tunnel route would have to pass directly through the saddle between them, more than 140 meters below the seabed at its lowest point. Engineers drilled exploratory boreholes from work ships anchored in open water, hauling up core samples that told a story of instability, porous rock that could crumble, and fault zones that could turn into rivers the moment a tunnel breached them. Some geologists argued the whole project was reckless. The chief tunnel engineers argued back that reckless was staying dependent on ferries in a typhoon strait. Construction began in 1971, on both shores at once, crews boring toward each other under the sea. The tunnel's enemy was never really rock. It was water. In May 1976, a drilling crew working the pilot tunnel, a narrow exploratory shaft dug ahead of the main bores to scout the ground, broke into a fault zone nobody had fully mapped. Seawater erupted through the breach at a rate of 80 tons a minute, roaring into the passage faster than pumps could clear it. Workers scrambled back through the flooding tunnel in the dark, some wading through water at their chests. It took the crew a week just to seal the breach with cement and stop the flooding, and nearly 4 years of methodical, painstaking work after that to fully stabilize the fault zone before digging could safely resume through it. The technique they refined, pumping a fast-setting cement grout deep into the fractured rock ahead of the drill, essentially freezing the danger in place before advancing another meter, became the tunnel's signature method, used again and again as the crews pushed deeper into unstable ground. Between 1976 and 1985, the project suffered several more major floods. Each time, the same brutal choreography repeated: seal, drain, grout, advance. For the men who worked the tunnel, and for years, it was almost entirely men, the job was less like construction and more like a long expedition into hostile territory. Shifts descended through vertical access shafts sunk from Yoshioka and Tapi, small towns on either shore, riding cramped lifts down hundreds of meters before walking or riding rail carts out beneath the seabed. The air itself worked against them. Deep underground, ambient rock heat combined with humidity from the surrounding water table to create working conditions that hovered near body temperature, thick and wet, day after day. Ventilation shafts pumped in fresh air, but the deeper crews pushed, the harder it became to keep the tunnel breathable. Rock falls were a constant threat in the fractured stone. The methane and gas pockets trapped in old volcanic layers posed a quieter, more insidious one. 34 workers died over the life of the project, to flooding, to collapse, to accidents in machinery that dwarfed the men operating it. Their names are remembered today at a memorial near the tunnel's Yoshioka entrance, a quiet reminder that the numbers describing the tunnel, its length, its depth, its cost, sit on top of a much smaller human arithmetic. On January 27th, 1983, after 12 years of digging, drill crews working from the Honshu and Hokkaido sides of the pilot tunnel finally met in the dark beneath the strait. It was a symbolic breakthrough more than a functional one. The pilot tunnel was a narrow service passage, not the finished rail line, but after everything the project had survived, it mattered enormously. Workers on both sides reportedly wept and embraced through the final gap in the rock, the first people in history to stand connected beneath the Tsugaru Strait. The main tunnel bores followed over the next several years, widened and lined and fitted for rail. Concrete segments, reinforced against both water pressure and seismic shock, were set ring by ring along the tunnel's length. Drainage systems capable of moving enormous volumes of water were built permanently into the design, because everyone involved understood by then that the sea does not stop pressing against the tunnel simply because construction has ended. The Seikan Tunnel opened to rail traffic on March 13, 1988, stretching about 53.85 kilometers, with roughly 23 kilometers of that running beneath the seabed itself. It held the title of the world's longest undersea tunnel for decades, and its lowest point sits some 240 meters below sea level, deeper than almost any other point humans have permanently occupied. The first trains that crossed it did so almost gently, gliding through a passage that had taken more human suffering and ingenuity to create than most passengers riding it will ever know. Today, Shinkansen bullet trains make the crossing that once claimed the Toya Maru and her passengers in a matter of minutes, in climate-controlled comfort, oblivious to the typhoon that might be raging on the surface far above their heads. Every so often, the tunnel is a reminder of a particular kind of national response to disaster, not simply mourning it, but re-engineering the world so it cannot happen quite the same way again.